By the summer of 1986, Nintendo had proven its mastery in the graceful art of platforming, with home console hits like Donkey Kong, Ice Climber, and Super Mario Bros. And with The Legend of Zelda, it took the possibilities of a single cartridge to the limits, providing an adventure too big to handle in one sitting. All that remained missing from the legendary library was a solid action game, one that required a little more firepower than foot stomping and club whacking. What Nintendo had in mind combined Mario's liquid-smooth leaping and landing, Link's tool-driven ability enhancing, and sci-fi gunplay that inspired action evolutions like Commando and Contra. Metroid was hatched for the Famicom Disk System on August 6, 1986, and then on the Nintendo Entertainment System 1 year later. The scrolling shooter was produced by Gunpei Yokoi, who had previously produced Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and the original Mario Bros. He also contributed heavily to the development of the Game & Watch series, the NES Zapper Gun, and eventually the Game Boy. It was directed by Yoshio Sakamoto, who had previously worked on the design for Donkey Kong Jr., and the music was written by Hirokazu Hip Tanaka, whose previous digital compositions included Urban Champion, Balloon Fight, Wild Gunman, Gyromite, and Duck Hunt. Metroid set itself apart by being a non-linear adventure-based game. Exploration was a crucial part of the experience. To delve deeper into Planet Zeeb's underground chambers, you had to eliminate bosses, discover new weapons, upgrade your armor, and find powerful abilities that permitted access to unreachable, sometimes secret areas, even if that meant going in reverse and moving the screen in an unthinkable direction, left. Although commonplace in games today, backtracking was a new concept in 1986. Search and discovery is still what makes the franchise popular today. The character whose footsteps you were retracing was a bounty hunter named Samus Aran. Commissioned by the Galactic Federation to infiltrate the pirate lair within Zeebs and recover a stolen organism locked inside, Samus was a lone soldier with a protective cybersuit, built-in laser cannon, wicked backflip, and a mysteriously concealed identity. The life force Samus was battling for was stolen from a deserted planet called SR-388. Although the organism was in hibernation, it was rumored that exposure to beta rays would cause it to multiply at an alarming rate. The Chozo, the creatures responsible for farming these parasites, called them Metroids, which meant ultimate warrior in their language. Metroid was one of the first games to successfully impress a feeling of desperation and solitude on the player, a feat not easily accomplished on an 8-bit console. The combination of detailed sprites, original, sometimes obscure map designs, disturbing creatures, and an intimidating, eerie musical score generated an unparalleled ambiance and atmosphere that trapped the viewer in an almost constant state of uneasy claustrophobia. You really felt alone. It's a good thing there were ice beams to keep you company. Wave beams came in handy too, along with energy tanks, screw attacks, various suits, and high jump boots. Following Zelda's lead, Metroid helped pioneer the idea of acquiring tools to strengthen your character and help you progress through the game. Up until that point, most ability-enhancing power-ups like the Power Shot in Gauntlet or the Star in Super Mario Bros. Offered only temporary boosts to your character and weren't required to reach the end. Items in Metroid were permanent fixtures. Missiles were mandatory if you wanted to finish the game, as was a peculiar method of travel new to the NES. Somehow, Samus could collapse that spacesuit into a metal sphere and roll around, eventually gaining the ability to drop bombs in the form as well. The Morph Ball slammed an undeniable stamp of coolness on the whole experience, and the franchise, that still exists today. Surviving through the space station to its innermost secrets brought you to the mastermind, Mother Brain. Her battle was definitely a challenge, but the real surprise was afterwards. Instead of flashing a victory screen and scrolling the credits, you had a short amount of time to escape the facility to safety. A twist few saw coming. If you managed to make it out, you were given an end screen based on the time it took you to get there. Metroid was one of the first games to contain multiple endings, 5 in total. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th endings all revealed something shocking. Samus popped off her biosuit's secure helmet, and the character underneath wasn't a man, or a robot, or a cyborg, but a woman. At a time when female video game characters were forced into the role of dutiful queen or kidnapped princess, Samus blew this norm to pieces, missile blasting the genre open for other heroines like Chun-Li and Lara Croft to play with the big boys. Contrary to internet clamor, Samus does not expose her birthday suit if you kill Mother Brain in less than 10 minutes. But you can play as Samus without her cyber suit if you're good enough. The multiple endings to Metroid enticed players to race through the game as fast as possible, a video game art form now commonly known as speedrunning. A game requiring such a massive amount of exploration needed a way to continue your progress, so Metroid utilized a password system that was still new to the industry. Writing the code down and punching it back in was a bit of a hassle, but it was much better than starting the game over from the very beginning. The Famicom disk system had a disk to save data on, so Metroid in Japan allowed 3 save slots, just like The Legend of Zelda did in North America. Unfortunately, the use of an internal battery to manage the files wasn't fully realized in time for the international release. But that didn't stop fans from digging up their own custom codes, including one hard-coded into Metroid that granted infinite ammo, health, all power-ups, and a slightly cooler ice beam. Metroid brought explosive action to the NES and a newfound respect for female protagonists to new heights. It stood by itself on the console, but it started a beloved franchise spanning 9 games that have collectively sold over 13 million units. But the franchise wouldn't see its second installment for another 5 years. Zelda told its Chapter 2 in 1987, and Mario got a pseudo-sequel in 1988. But no other 8-bit Metroid was released during the life cycle of the NES or Famicom. This was partly because 3 years after Metroid, gamers got their hands on the bulky but brilliant Game Boy. Eager to develop exclusive titles for the handheld, Nintendo commissioned the R&D 1 team to strip Samus down to black and white. Metroid 2: Return of Samus landed on August 26, 1991, and wasn't released in Japan until 5 months later. Despite it being the second release in the franchise, Metroid 2 is the 6th installment in the story thus far. The game was developed by Intelligent Systems, the first and only Metroid the company made. Yokoi produced, and it was co-directed by Hiroji Kiyotake and Hiroyuki Kimura. Much like James Cameron's Aliens, Return of Samus sends the space hunter back to the planet that started it all, SR-388. After losing contact with the team sent to investigate the Metroid lair, Samus is promised a huge bounty to destroy the parasite's origin once and for all. Deep within a live volcano, Samus finds Chozo ruins, free-roaming Metroids, and strange links to her past. Metroid 2 played much like it did on the console, in that shooting, platform jumping, and exploration define the gameplay. It even controlled a little easier, with Samus gaining the ability to crouch and fire, as well as jump and shoot straight down. However, the revolutionary advancement model that blew up the original game was a bit more limiting on the Game Boy. Progression was based on the eradication of Metroids. In the lower right corner of the screen was a counter indicating how many of the life-sucking flying jellyfish were left. Defeating all of them in a particular area caused an earthquake that lowered the lava level, opening up a new section of the world full of more Metroids to destroy and more lava to do away with. You were still hunting for energy tanks and add-ons, but you were confined to one segment of the world at a time. But there were still new abilities to be found, the most invaluable involving Samus dunking herself in rubber cement, giving her the Spider Ball ability. This allowed Samus to crawl up any wall and ceiling when morphed, offering a new efficient method of treasure seeking. The Spider Ball and the Space Jump, which allowed Samus to flip continuously in the air, returned in later installments, along with the Spring Ball, which let Samus' morph shape bounce off the ground. The Arm Cannon also got an upgrade, adding Spazer and Plasma Beams to the mix. The black and white color template definitely limited the level of detail the designers could lay out in each area, but it also led to some interesting permanent changes to Samus' gear. Without color, there was no way you could visibly register the swap between the normal suit and the Various suit, so the updated gear gained round metal shoulders, and they've stuck ever since. Despite the Metroid 2 cartridge being about 6 times as small as its predecessor, you could now save your game for the first time in the franchise. Scattered throughout the forgotten corridors were portals Samus could stand on and preserve her progress. These popped up in every game following, eventually becoming energy recovery units. As you dug deeper into the Metroid hive, you discovered an ecosystem that's exclusive to the Game Boy release. Metroid 2 is the only game in the series to show every stage of the Metroid's 6 development cycles, outside of the one introduced in the first game: Alpha, Gamma, Zeta, Omega, and Queen. The more developed the organism, the stronger their attacks become, which hunters took notice of as they worked their way up the evolutionary ladder. This led to a frantic confrontation with the Queen Metroid, but interestingly, no escape run back to Samus' ship. Instead, Samus encountered something her experiences hadn't prepared her for. After reaching the surface, she stumbled upon a newly hatched Metroid that mistook the bounty hunter for its mother. Instead of wasting the last Metroid, Samus spared it and took it aboard. She left for the Ceres space station to return with a live sample, and a strange bond was formed between them. The return of Samus wasn't as well received as its NES counterpart, mainly for being more linear and not leaving such a dramatic impression in the audio and visual departments. The model of Samus used was bigger in proportion to her surroundings to give her more detail using the limited graphics capabilities, making the Game Boy environments feel a little cramped. But it still maintained the high standards set by the first Metroid, introduced methods of exploration the series couldn't live without, and told one of the most pivotal chapters in Samus's evolving plotline. Some consider it to be the weakest game in the franchise, but the least outstanding installment in one of the most groundbreaking action sagas of all time is still a fine game. Come back next week for part 2 in our 5-part Metroid retrospective. As we move onward, so does technology, as the Super Nintendo and Game Boy Advance give birth to the 2 most remarkable installments in the franchise. One showed the new generation exactly how a series should be upgraded with new hardware, and the other divulged what was thought to be the conclusion to Samus's story.